Welcome to the Petropapers podcast. Say that 10 times fast. This is where you get your oil and gas intellectual stimulation by asking the technical questions. I'm Yoshi Pradhan, and with me here today, I have Krisha Raghav Chaturvedi. And today, we're going to have a little bit of a twist in our podcast. We're going to talk about the impetus of why research is important and why the Petropapers podcast even started to begin with. And Krishna is going to tell us all about it through his experience. Welcome to the podcast, Krishna.
Thank you, Yoshi. The type of energy was really stimulating. And then again, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I remembered in our conversation prior to this podcast, we were talking about the importance of research, and it would be a great idea to even have a discussion about this in this episode. So I think you'd be the right person to talk about it. So I wanted to go ahead and get started by asking, how'd you get here? Can you tell me about your background?
So, Yogi, I'm a petroleum engineer. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in petroleum engineering. So, I did my bachelor's from University of Petroleum Energy Studies in Dehradun. Then again, I worked for a year with a couple of oil field companies, and then again, I went on to grab a master's and a PhD in petroleum engineering from Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Petroleum Technology. That's located somewhere in Uttar Pradesh. That's one of the states in India. Uh, during my undergrad, I realized that there is a severe lack of information that needs to happen. And then again, while I was working, I got to know that yes, while the processes, they are all there, uh, there is a huge scope that they can be improved. And then again, with the transitions that were coming in the oil and gas industry, the way it was evolving, and the economic forces at work, I thought that it would be a really good time to get an advanced degree. And then again, when I had the opportunity to go for a PhD, I took it, and here I am.
Awesome. To expand on some of your experience, and I know that you've done quite a bit. I've seen on your LinkedIn where you've published a textbook, and I won't steal your thunder. Could you name some of your academic highlights and how it helped you in your career?
Uh, well, we have a saying in Hindi, "अपने मुंह में मिट्ठू नहीं बनना चाहिए." But yeah, I published a lot of papers. I published more than 20 papers during my PhD. I published a couple of patents, that were related to carbon capture, utilization, and storage. I also did some work related to hydrogen storage and how conformance agents can be used to uh, enhance the storage efficacy of green hydrogen in the subsurface. I published two books during my PhD. And for the type of work that I did, I was also recognized by the Federation of Indian Petroleum Industry uh, by when they provided me when they awarded me with the best PhD thesis award in new energy studies, the very first award that they gave out in new PhD studies. So I did some work. Let's not get into the specifics, but yes, I did a lot of work.
No, I can tell you did quite a bit of work. I mean, having a PhD and then publishing a couple books, publishing academic papers, wanted to show your breadth and depth of the experience that you bring to the table in discussing the research and why you're the right person to talk to. And I do understand, I know the Hindi saying quite a bit, so I completely understand about that as well. I can sense and I'm going to predict that you're going to get a Padma Shri Award. I'm just going to say it.
Again, I would like to re-emphasize again in Hindi, आपके मुंह की शक्कर, आपके मुंह की शक्कर लग जाए.
Yeah, completely understand. So can you explain to me the importance of research and why viewers and listeners should consider it?
That's actually a very important question to ask. And usually we associate research with, something what the PhDs do, what faculty members do, or something, that's a very niche part of the industry. But research is something that's all around us. And if there is something that differentiates humans from, the other parts of, the wider animal kingdom, it is a natural inquisitiveness, the ability to understand and ask questions, comprehend information. And then again, once you have that entire gamut of information there, you try to find out, ways in which, things can be made better, in which things can be made more efficient, and in which, the existing processes, they can be made much, much simpler, different, that enhance the efficacy and efficiency of things. And this is all research is all about. So it's my personal belief that everybody is a researcher. when we are all children, we keep asking a lot of questions. We are naturally inquisitive. And somehow, oh, so we see that we have a guest. I,
You do.
yeah. So we're all naturally inquisitive. And it's very important that even if you are an undergrad student or if you're, plus 12s, it's very essential that you keep asking the right questions. You keep trying to identify some of, the skills, some of, the things that can be worked upon. So research is something that has got us here, and research is something that will give get the humankind much, much ahead.
Absolutely. So that's part of the reason why I even started the Petropapers podcast, for example. I thought the research is really important. I thought trying to make research as tangible as possible for our viewers and listeners by selecting papers and interviewing the authors of those papers, similar to like a book club, for example. I thought that would be a great idea. So that's
Yeah.
why the Petropapers podcast even started to begin with. And I'm really glad that someone resonated with that, such as yourself, to have this discussion today. I wanted to go on to another question and really just dig into the crux of research. What are some of the gaps in the industry is missing related to research?
Well, before going into the gaps that are some of the gaps that exist in the industry, I would say that there are some of the gaps that exist with the current researchers also. So you said that you started Petropapers because there was an inherent need to go into the depths and understand that how a certain paper was born. Every paper has its own journey, and it's very essential that you understand what the journey is all about. One of the best things is asking somebody who has written the paper. Of course, they are the best people to explain what it's all about. But then again, crucial skill that's missing from a lot of people is how you read a paper. For most people, even people who hold a very advanced degree like a PhD, they somehow lack the skill to understand and comprehend how a paper is read. They look at it as a series, a set of data and set of observations, but it's a lot. And once you have that understanding, you'll exactly get to the very next part, that what is the gap in the industry. So the petroleum industry has never been a very uh, stable industry. It's always been cyclic in nature. There have been booms and there have been busts. And specifically nowadays, with the energy transition that's happening all around us, you need to have an understanding that what are some of the technologies that are going to be part and parcel of the future. So the $1 trillion hydrocarbon industry, it's not going to evaporate overnight once people stop using some of the fossil fuels. The industry is going to transition into a carbon dioxide removal industry. That's my belief. Or it's going to transition into setup that's going to support geothermal operations offshore, where some of our offshore engineering skills can be leveraged. Or it's going to transition into a hydrogen storage industry. We have all the know-how, we have all the expertise, we know how to manage the flow lines, we know how to manage the petrophysical properties and everything. But how do you link all this? And this is something you'll only understand once you get into this habit of reading papers, going beyond the data, going beyond, the observations, trying to empathize with how, the authors wrote it. So I'm a petroleum engineer, but when I started to work in carbon capture, that was something very new to me. And I always had this difficulty that why did the authors do this or why did the authors do that? So I went and spoke to the author themselves that why did you do this? Can you explain to me? And when once I sat with them, I went through the entire thought process. Then I realized that yes, they did this for a purpose. And if you resonate with the purpose, the results are going to follow. Stop chasing the results, understand the purpose, things are going to fall in place.
That's very insightful. I think, again, how Petropapers has started, it's a first step, as you alluded to. It's the first step to understand what the author's intent is. And then once you understand that purpose, you can connect the results. So I really appreciate you verbalizing that. How do you conduct research and read through so many papers? I know you've published quite a bit, but what is your thought process? I have a YouTube video on how to read a paper, but I want to know from you on how do you do it?
Well, The best part of reading a paper is starting at the first, starting from the title, going towards the abstract, introduction. That's the easiest way. You read it as it is written. That's the easiest way to read a paper. But however, I understand that sometimes, the way that's the easiest is often not the thing that's going to attract you the most. So whenever you look at a paper, just try to rationalize that what is something that you're planning to get out of it. Are you trying to understand that how the authors did a certain experiment? Then you go and read the materials and methods section. Or you're trying to understand that what were some of the conditions that were influencing the results. You go and look at the conditions that they did the experiments in. Or you want to understand a certain experiment results. So you go and look at the very specific section. Or you want to have a very broader understanding. So you go and read the material, the introduction section that's going to provide the state of the art. So you need to have an understanding that what you're planning to get out of that paper. Try to complete that entire thing. But see, over a period of time, you'll realize that you cannot be selective with papers. You need to read everything because if you put the guardrails yourself, you're going to miss out something. And with the time, I would recommend that once you are reading a paper, try to read it as a story. You go through it an entire time. If you find something interesting, highlight it, make a note of it, put it somewhere. I'm a big fan of reading papers in the hard form. I take a printout, I sit with a highlighter, I make copious amount of notes. And trust me, once you read something and then you write it on a notebook, it's going to help you a lot. Your muscle memory starts to kick in. That yes, I saw this. It's going to help out. So initially, if you are a new person coming to reading a paper, I totally empathize with you. You can try to have an understanding that yes, I'm reading my paper for certain purpose. Maybe I want to read the materials method. Maybe I want to read, the introduction part, or maybe I want to read a certain result. But yes, as you advance along, try reading the entire paper. Try reading it as a story. Try making notes. Try to highlight everything and try to connect the dots. So there would be multiple papers. If you find A, B, C in a certain paper, I assure you that there would be D, E, F in a certain paper. And once you have this understanding of connecting the dots, research comes very easy.
That's awesome. That you made it seem like the PhD is so doable. I actually have a dream of doing a PhD one day. So that's a great blueprint as far as the how you conduct your research. And then reading the
But
papers if it's a story is definitely important. Read it as it's written and understanding what you want to get out of it is also important, what your end goal is, but also keeping an open mind at the same time. So those are some key takeaways. Uh, that's awesome. I had one last question to ask you before I let you go. And the question is, do you have like what else should the industry know about research? What else do you want to share as far as research goes?
so, like, this is a general comment, and this is not specifically directed towards the academia or the industry. When you say it's research, it's free flowing. Uh, it can be fundamental, it can be applied in nature, it can be something that's totally uncalled off. Most of our inventions have taken place when we were going for the moon and we missed and we landed among the stars. So it's always good to have an open mind. You may get a certain result, and I've seen people, getting depressed that, oh my God, I was not able to get a certain result, or I was not able to get a good, like, I'll give you a very brief example. There was a person working with me who was trying to target a very higher oil recovery using a surfactant, and they were not getting a higher oil recovery. And they were quite depressed that, I spent more than 2 years synthesizing that chemical. I did extensive characterizations, and now I'm not getting the results that I was desiring. I recommended it. Why are you looking at only the oil recovery part? Why don't you explore it for foaming? Why don't you explore it as a conformance control agent for gas storage? And somehow it turned out to be a wonderful foaming agent. So keeping an open mind is very important. See, you may have started with a certain set of objectives, and if you keep holding them onto them, uh, I, you are in for a world of pain. So be dynamic in your approach. And this is a recommendation to everybody. The world is volatile, it's uncertain. It's chaotic, and things that used to work, 5 years or 10 years ago may or may not work the same way. There is nothing to be depressed about. There is nothing, to get worried about. Adapt, change, improvise. Ultimately, you are going to improve the world.
Well said.
Thank
Well,
you.
so yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Krishna.
Thanks, Yogesh. Thank you for having me.
Well, folks, be sure to listen to this on YouTube and on the Audible podcast. I'll have more information on Krishna's technical papers and books in the comments below when for our YouTube video listeners and viewers. This is Petropapers. I'm Yoga Pradhan, and we are signing off.